In the aftermath of World War II, the United States and Russia's relationship became increasingly more hostile. The threat of nuclear war and anti-US and anti-Russian propaganda fueled the Cold War. But aside from nuclear weapons, proxy wars, and complicated politics of a war that isn't really happening, arguably the most exciting aspect of the Cold War was the space race. Obviously, the most iconic imagery from the space race is Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong landing on the moon. And while this seems to have set in stone, at least for those of us in the States, that the United States won the space race, Russia was ahead of the US for most achievements during this time. First object in orbit with Sputnik, first man in space, first woman in space. In fact, Russia was ahead of the US on that one by 20 years. Now, in many ways, this could be because Russia had a much easier time hiding their failures, meaning cutting corners was not as much of a PR risk. After the fall of the Soviet Union, many of these covered-up or hidden mission failures became declassified. But there are claims that some of the failed missions from the Soviet space program have never been uncovered. One such claim is that of the Lost Cosmonauts. The Italian radio enthusiasts known as the Judica-cordiglia brothers allegedly have recordings of Russian cosmonauts dying in space, on re-entry, and flying out of orbit, all caught through a salvaged German bunker and an amalgamation of custom and scavenged equipment. Now, while none of these recordings have been substantiated, I will warn you that they might be a little disturbing to listen to. Here are a few. Probably the most famous is what is allegedly the sound of a cosmonaut's failed re-entry and her last communications before burning up in the atmosphere. Here we can hear what is allegedly the heartbeat and breathing of a cosmonaut before a supposedly unmanned Russian spacecraft crashed. There are apparently a few more, including the audio that is supposed to be a cosmonaut suffocating and a cosmonaut bouncing off the atmosphere into deep space. But after hours and hours of searching on archived websites and documentaries, I couldn't find these recordings. It's important to note that these have never been confirmed or recognized by the Russian government, and criticisms around their credibility make these far from conclusive. And the fame that the Judica-cordiglia brothers gained from their discovery definitely shows a motive for faking such recordings. The discussion as to their validity has been going on since their release, even up to today. Even having native Russian speakers arguing as to whether or not these are even actual Russian accents. The theory of lost cosmonauts is not limited to the recordings, however. Unconfirmed leaks from December of 1959, reportedly from a high-ranked Czech communist, alleged that many other cosmonauts had been killed in the pursuit of space travel, while never being confirmed by the Russian government. But this whole situation is a muddled mess. Verified hoaxes being thrown into the mix, incongruities with the Czech and Judica-cordiglia stories, and plenty of healthy skepticism has made these reports of the lost communists more of an urban legend or a conspiracy theory nowadays. Whether or not they were real, the lack of verifiable evidence means there will always be doubt. But either way, real or not, these stories come from a very real place. While these cases remain unconfirmed and highly speculated about, there are 100% confirmed events in which Russian and indeed US space explorers died in some pretty terrible accidents. Vladimir Komarov died when the experimental and now infamously poorly put together spacecraft he had been chosen to pilot failed to deploy its parachute. There are some disturbingly real recordings of him yelling in fear and rage at those who failed to make the spacecraft safe enough. His body became molten on impact. In his last moments, he requested an open casket so that his higher-ups could see what they had done to him, a request which was honored once his remains were salvaged. A sobering story, to be honest, but a very real one. And the Russian Soyuz 11 crew are the only people to have actually died in space due to a faulty valve depressurizing their capsule while still inside. These stories, the confirmed and the unconfirmed, are evidence that just because the Cold War wasn't a troops on the ground type of war, it still had very real victims. The space race was an amazing way to kickstart real progress in spaceflight technology, and because of it we saw some of the most crowning achievements of humankind. Humans in space, people landing on the moon. But the rushed and frantic nature of the race also led to more than a few unnecessary deaths that could have been avoided if it weren't for the over-eagerness to beat the other country. So, this wasn't quite a Creepy Files episode. I felt like I needed a bit more freedom to cover this topic, so I decided to make it a standalone video. Let me know what you thought about this in the comments, suggest what I should cover next on my Twitter or Instagram. The research and sources can be found in the description. See you all next time.